Aston Thompson, a.k.a. Bucky Marshall, was a revered PNP activist in the 1970s and was a strongman for the Spangler's Posse of the Arnnette Gardens and other West Kingston community that has PNP affiliations. Back in the 1970s, two political parties controlled Jamaica, the JLP, Jamaica Labour Party, led by Edward Seaga, and the PNP, People's National Party, led by Michael Manley, who was the Prime Minister at the time. Jamaica was undergoing some political turmoil, with both fraction of the two political parties claying, which turns out into deadly gun violence with casualties on both sides. Bucky Marshall was one of community dons who spearheaded the fight against the JLP gunmen, and one of those famous antagonists was Claudius Massop, a JLP activist and strongman for the community of Tivoli Gardens and Denham Town community. Bucky and Massop were bitter rivals until the two got incarcerated and was placed in the same jail cell where they reconciled and orchestrated a peace treaty to stop the political bloodshed. When Bucky Marshall and Claudius Massop came out of jail, they announced a peace treaty in front of the Jamaican media. Both Bucky and Massop wanted peace and was tired of the political killing that was happening in Jamaica, so they both organized the One Love Peace concert, along with Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Jacob Miller, and Michael Manley, which was to be held on April 22, 1978. 2 days before the scheduled One Love Peace concert, Bob Marley, his wife Rita Marley, and manager, was shot by a number of JLP gunmen sent by Edward Seaga. One of those suspected gunmen were, in fact, Lester Lloyd Coke, a.k.a. Jim Brown, who was Seaga's bodyguard, who would later become the Don of Tivoli Gardens. With all that has been transpired, an injured Bob Marley still performed at the One Love Peace concert, calling the leaders of the two political parties, Edward Seaga and Michael Manley, along with Bucky Marshall and Claudius Massop. Bucky Marshall wanted peace, but Seaga wanted war. Edward Seaga colluded with the CIA to unalive Michael Manley and all the Spanglers, which includes Bucky Marshall. Michael Manley's PNP was backed by the Cubans, while the opposition leader, Edward Seaga, JLP, was backed by the CIA, where a political civil war broke out. Edward Seaga plotted and had Claudius Massop killed on Industrial Terrace in Kingston on February 4, 1979, while setting in motion to have Lester Lloyd Coke to become the Don of Tivoli Gardens. The next target of Edward Seaga and the CIA was Bucky Marshall, who was killed in New York on March 8, 1980, 8 months before Jamaica's most deadliest general election. With Bucky Marshall and Claudius Massop dead, Seaga had the plot to win the 1980 elections to rid the country of Spanglers and other PNP activists. Bucky Marshall and Claudius Massop were the ones who was preventing the Civil War, but it was too late. They were both being exploited by their two political representatives, but were cut down. In a 2024 biopic entailing Bob Marley's life, the writer of the Bob Marley movie made a fatal error naming Bucky Marshall as Bob Marley's supposing shooter, which in fact it was Lester Lloyd Coke, a.k.a. Jim Brown, who was Seaga's bodyguard, who did the actual shooting. Seaga is the devil. I'm a JLP supporter. Seaga is not a saint. He ordered Jim Brown and the Shower Posse to set ablaze a Golden Age home where old people reside, killing all the occupants of the residence. The name of the Golden Age home is Eventide, Home of the Age. He then ordered Coke to vandalize and burn every home in resident of Fletcher Land. Coke was untouchable under the guidance of Edward Seaga. Coke later killed a number of residents in the Arnnette Gardens community in a section called Havana, the birthplace of the gang called the Fatherless Crew. With this conclusion, Bucky Marshall will always be remembered in the Arnnette Gardens community as a Robin Hood and defender. He loved kids and cherished all his children. He was a good father and a loving character, a swagger man dressing elegantly and smoking a cigarette or a spliff. R.I.P. Your name is cleared.